Good morning and welcome to this Thursday, May 18th, 2023 School Board Workshop. We'd like to call us to order and let's begin with a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would, please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks for coming together on this odd Thursday morning, but very important topic for us to discuss. I don't have any public input cards, so I guess we'll get right into 3.01, the budget review with Mr. Ward, and I bet the first words out of your mouth are going to be that Tallahassee is delivering dump trucks worth of money this year.
I expected no money.
Tallahassee may be claiming they're rigging this dump trucks of money, but that is not what's going on.
All right, well.
So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Appreciate you guys coming in for a quick budget review, and I will keep it quick. And sorry y'all had to wait in line to get in here because it draws such a crowd, but that's typical. Our budget stuff is pretty mundane. Just to start out with, there were some substantial changes to the FEFP formulas this year. Some of them good, some of them bad, and some of them probably really don't have an impact on us. Some of the things to list that are noteworthy is they renamed the district cost differential to the comparable wage factor. It has absolutely nothing to do with wages. It's still calculated the exact same way that it was before. The only major difference, which was beneficial to us, was it's no longer punitive. If you're lower than 100%, you are now 100%. So in the past, we've been usually around 97, 98% of the DCD, and now we are automatically at 100%. So that part was helpful to us. If you are one of the districts that are fortunate enough to be higher than the 1%, then you are not punished. You continue to be whatever that is. So if your district's at a 102, you're getting 2% more than a district that's at 100. They rolled the teacher salary increase allocation, instructional materials, reading, funding compression, teacher salary classroom assistants into the BSA. So all those things rolled into the BSA. And they all have a little bit of a different impact or change because of that. Instructional materials in the past weren't part of the weighted FTE. They were delivered or allocated based on unweighted FTE, so now they're allocated based on weighting, which is a positive thing. Instructional materials, the teacher salary increase in the past was based on weighted, so it didn't have an impact there, but it was also impacted by the DCD, so we're going to 100%, whereas in the past we were only getting 98%. The funding compression, we used to benefit from the funding compression. Now that money was rolled into the BSA, and it gives everybody the same impact. So there's no assistance for the districts that have less than the average from the funding compression anymore. And then the teacher classroom supply assistance also rolled into the BSA.
Scott, real quick to that point. So those aren't restricted funds anymore. Those are just
They're
general
no
funds
longer
in the
considered
BSA.
restricted, and we'll talk about that a little bit further in a minute. So they changed the name of supplemental academic instruction, the categorical, to the education enrichment allocation. It's still considered a categorical, but it's named differently, and there are a couple of changes as to what you can spend the funding on, but it really didn't change substantially. They rolled the turnaround supplemental services allocation into the education enrichment allocation, but on a positive note, they still calculate it the same way. So if your district was receiving that in the past, your district will receive it again in the future based on your schools that are in DA status. And then they deleted the sparsity supplement, which does not impact our district. However, at the end, to concede to the small districts, they included a small district factor to the base funding allocations for certain districts that are smaller that can't raise the funds that they need to raise. So again, the last bullet point had no impact on us. So what does that do for our base funding? And it's probably a little bit confusing, so if you don't mind, I'll stand up and actually where I can point. So what I did for us is, and I apologize for y'all in the crowd, but what I did for us is, here is our fourth calc as it is today. And what you'll see is we have weighted FTE of 52,000, our BSA is 4587, our district cost differential is 9746, and our calculated base funding is $235 million. So what I did was I wanted to give you a better comparison as to what really happened with the BSA base funding. I wanted to restate the fourth calc using the methodology that they're using for the first count or the conference report. So what I did was I added all of our former categoricals into this number here. So this includes instructional materials, TSIA, and all of those numbers. And then I changed the DCD to the wage factor of 1. And then I took the number of students that we have, which is exactly the same as fourth calc, to determine what is the real base student allocation today if they use the same methodology today that they're going to use next year. And I came up with $4,907. And so when you take that to the conference report and you add the number of FTE increase, which is 3,000, and please be mindful that out of that 3,000, we're only projecting about 500 for us, the district. The rest of that is scholarships and charter school growth. So we're not going to see a 3,000 student impact on our budget that we have to be concerned about. So you can see that the increase in BSA is really only $262. That's about 4.7%. That's not the 12% that they're telling everybody. So that's really what the difference, and they're telling everybody dump trucks, but we're really getting a pickup truck. So, so $262, and then that would be what our comparable wage factor would be. So our base funding is a $28 million increase, but again, the majority of that is not going to be ours. It's going to be going to charter schools and scholarships. So we did the projection this year prior to the legislation meeting, and in that projection, the Department of Education actually predicts or projects what our increase in scholarships will be. And with that projection, we were at about 51, but then whenever they come out with House Bill 1, the legislative committee went back, and there's a certain commission that's under the legislators that do all of their projections, and they increased that to 53. So, or actually 55 weighted, but 53, they went up $3,000, in other words. And so that 3,000, majority of that's going to be scholarships there. Before I move on, any questions about this?
So, okay, so you were estimating 500 of the 3,000 would be us, like 1/6. So does it then stand to reason that we get 1/6 of that 28 million?
And I've got that later on, so I
Of
can
course
show
you
you
do.
in a little bit
Okay.
more detail. So that'll be helpful.
All right.
Sure.
Tyler, do you have a question
Scott,
too?
real quick, to that similar train of thought, so the 4.7% or the 262-ish increase in BSA, is that inclusive of all the funding that used to be restricted being moved into the other? So that 262 isn't even a true increase there. A lot of those funds we got before.
And I'll break that out in just a minute too, so you're jumping ahead of me.
All good. Finance training that you taught me. You taught me to ask these questions, so kudos.
So the categoricals. The categoricals are gone but not forgotten. They're still there. We still have to do all of the, follow all the statutes. They changed the formula, but there's still proviso bill language, conforming bill language, and current statutes still require us to do the work. So reading instruction, we still have to do the reading programs that we've done in the past. They've changed a little bit, but they're primarily the same. We still have to do a comprehensive reading plan and submit that to the Department of Education, and I'm guessing that we'll have to let them know exactly how much money we're allocating or budgeting for reading. Instructional materials, they actually struck the part that said that the commissioner will certify to the district, and they said the district will certify to the commissioner. So we still have to tell them how much money we're going to spend on instructional materials. And it's still the district and the board's responsibility to ensure that adequate instructional materials are provided to the students. And then the teacher classroom supplies, one of the major changes that they did with that is they rolled it into the BSA, but now they give a flat amount. They said a minimum of $300. So we have to give a minimum of $300 out of our base student allocation for teacher supplies to the teachers, and it still follows the same path as last year. The difference is that last year, we only allocated about $280 per student, or excuse me, per teacher. So we're actually having to give more of our base funding towards teacher supplies than what we have in the past. So again, one of my major concerns with this change, and one of the things that probably concerns me the most, is the base student allocation and the base funding formula in the past has always been your unrestricted funds to address your things that aren't restricted, the needs of the district. And now we have restricted the base funding, portions of the base funding allocation. The teacher's salary information, which I'll get to in just a minute, is also the same way. Yes.
Excuse me, back to the supplies. So does the state of Florida still give directly to teachers paycheck?
No, sir. It goes through us. It flows through us.
And does Apple Mart play any part in this? It's available for teachers for supplies?
Apple Mart's still available, but they're $300. It doesn't count towards their $300.
That's all, that's what I'm asking.
Yes, sir. It doesn't count towards the $300. So, you know, what do we do ongoing? We still have to budget for these programs. We still have to provide the instructional materials. We still have to provide the additional reading support. So what I'm proposing that the district do in the budget process is continue the funding per student that we've been doing in the past. So it wouldn't be a categorical, but we would still budget for it. That way, our people in our departments will have an idea about how much money they should be spending. And in doing so also, it creates some stability to the funding. So like if we weren't doing an adoption and we didn't need as much instructional material funding, we could still set it aside and have it there. So in the following year, we could double up if it's a major adoption and get what we need, and not use that money for something else that may be reoccurring. And then the next year, when we have an instructional material need, we won't have the funding to be able to cover it. So I would propose to the board that we continue to budget those items per student as we have in the past. And that's kind of been in line with what they've been doing with us. A lot of these categoricals, they've been increasing every year because of the number of students, but the per student amount has not been increasing for us. So you'll see there, reading, we do about $50 per student, instructional materials, $81.68. Science, library, and teacher classroom supplies would be. And that $750,000 is completely an estimate at this point in time, obviously, so we'll narrow it down closer to time. Teacher salary increase proviso language, I put the language in here, but I'm not going to go through it. But basically what they said in the proviso language is 1.41% of your base funding has to be separated out for the teacher salary increase allocation. So they did away with the allocation, but then they turned around and put language in that said you have to now use your base funding, and they give you a number that you had to use. So it still exists. A and B, simply A is to get it to 47.5, which doesn't apply to our district anymore because we're at 48.5. So we fall under more of B, which is provide salary increases to other full-time instructional personnel as defined by 212.012. So teacher salary increase. We don't necessarily have to do any increase to our minimum. We can do it all through performance pay in the upcoming year because we're past A. The good thing about it is they've done away with the restrictions of the 150% or 75% on performance pay increases, so it no longer is tied to performance pay. So we don't have to increase our beginning teacher salary in order to give an increase to performance pay. That is done away with, so that's a good thing. So what is our budgetary impact to the
Can I ask a
district?
question, Scott, on
Yes, ma'am.
the last slide?
Sure.
That $802,000 that was in the last paragraph,
That is
that is to
actually,
maintain, is that, go ahead.
that is the
And
state
2
number,
million,
that is not
sorry.
our number.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
802 million, but, so
Okay.
4.52% has to be set aside for maintaining, and we far exceed that.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask.
We
Okay.
far exceed that
Thank you.
for our district, the allocation for our district. So
Okay.
we are good for that.
Okay.
Budgetary impact to the district, when you look at the bottom line of the comparison between Calc 4 and the new conference report, it's about $369 per unweighted student. So you take our projected FTE that doesn't include charters or scholarships, that's about $38,323. So you multiply that together and you come up with $14.1 million. We had some changes to the Florida retirement system the upcoming year. They extended drop. They put back in some of the things that they had taken away for our retirees, which I think are all good news, especially for those of us that are looking at retirement in the near future. But with that came a cost. So we're going to have to increase, obviously, our contribution to the Florida retirement system. The impact of that to the district's $3.8 million. The increase in health insurance contribution is $3.4 million. The district's current proportionate share of TSIA is $3.4 million, which that'll go through the teacher salary increase, obviously. So that, for other purposes, that leaves us about $3.4 million to work with other purposes for. That's kind of the bottom line of what we're working with on our budget for the upcoming year. We are working on that. We don't see any issues with us having that out at our normal time in June, July-ish. We think everything will work out through that. That is really all I had for impact on the general fund, but I think something else that is noteworthy is there is a charter school change in how we fund capital outlay for our charter schools. The state has kind of gone back and forth with this through time. The last time they made school districts give a portion of their millage to the charter school, it was extremely unpopular, and the legislator caved a year later and went back and changed it, and they started providing PICO funding to the charter schools, and it didn't cost us anything. Obviously, the people who like to build schools for charter schools are looking at this and seeing that their income's kind of dipped with the economy and with the slowing of charter schools. So now they're looking at some additional funding. And so what they're going to do is they're going to phase in a change to us where we're going to have to provide a proportionate share of our 1.5 millage to charter schools. Basically, that will be a calculation that will be done by the Department of Education. They will take what our 96% of our 1.5 mil levy that we levy at the beginning of the year. They'll reduce it for our COPS debt obligation that we have. And then the remaining part, they'll divide by the district's COFD and the charter school's FTE to come up with a per student amount. They're going to continue to give their PICO funding, and the PICO funding is less than what that proportionate share is. So we will be responsible for making up the difference between the state's PICO funding and that proportionate share. So we don't have to give them a proportionate share of our 1.5 mil, it's an adjusted amount. And so, you get to reduce the charter schools amount by any capital outlay funds provided by the state, which DOE will do that calculation each year, probably around January, February. Again, it's phased in. So for fiscal year 2023-24, we will only provide 20% of that calculation, and then each year it goes up 20% until 27-28, when it will be 100%. My early calculations, and these are early calculations, that this year will probably cost us between $200,000 to $250,000 out of our capital funding. And then each year that'll double.
So to be clear, it's 20% of their proportionate share, then 40% of their share, et cetera, et cetera.
Did you verify that this does not include conversion charters since there are buildings?
This does not include conversion charters, so. That is good because of that reason, but also we are still responsible for those conversion charter schools, so it's kind of a wash. Still costs us money. And that's all I had for today's presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
Have you determined where we fall then, since since we've lost our compression.
Yes, I have. I have determined where we fell. We fell even further. We're now 65th in the state of 67.
And what's our, do you know the population, where we rank in population?
I don't know where we rank in population, but we are still
think we moved to
one
7th,
of
right?
the upper medium-sized districts,
We were 18th, but I think we moved to 17th.
probably. We're growing pretty quick.
So we're 17th in population and 65th in per student funding. Which is about where we started 10 years ago when I came on board. And so my little Don Quixote quest has not been very successful.
Unfortunately, the gain that we got and the
Appreciate it.
change in the DCD was erased by the loss of the compression funding.
Yeah, because it was about 3 million in the DCD, 'cause that's where I started. And we got to about 3 million.
That is true.
So when you say they're putting that compression into the base student allocation, they're not putting that additional $3 million in?
They're putting that, they took that money and they
And they
put it
just
in
put it
there,
in.
but they distribute it for everybody. Whereas before, it was
Got it.
targeted to the districts that had the higher need.
I was wondering how they were going to continue to fund the districts that are over the 100 mark if they weren't taking from the other districts, but this is probably one of the ways they're doing that.
Thank you for making it very simple.
I
Seriously.
try. You're welcome.
I'm not done with my 65th out of 67. So we have said, this board has been pretty stoic in the fact that there should be some equity, at least average. And just so anyone that's listening in the room, we just want to be average, not better. And I think it's time that we begin to look at a legal remedy, since they're clearly in violation of the statute that founded the FEFP.
I'm taking notes.
Yep. If the board thinks that's reasonable.
I think it's reasonable.
I do too.
I do too.
I think we need the money.
It's $21 million, by the way, just so we tie a number to it. Right.
What does that look like for next steps? Workshop topic of some kind?
I'll do some research and see if we've got a cause of action and what that might look like. Come back to you.
So I'm waiting for the information from Mr. Ward to populate my
Big spreadsheet.
big spreadsheet. But there's about 30 districts that could benefit. And I think that we need, my opinion is, we ought to reach out to those districts and their council and see if they would join us.
Right.
I don't think we should take this quest on alone.
Oh, right. 100%.
You're gonna get some pushback from the districts that benefit, obviously. So it's gonna be pitting smaller
That's
against
been
larger and,
That's been the issue all
Yeah.
along. But the law is the law,
right.
so.
I will tell you, because we have same conversations about DCD that you guys have with finance officers, and I will tell you that there are some districts who benefit from the DCD that still benefit from the cost comparable wage factor that are upset that they brought the lower districts up to 100. And I keep thinking to myself, like, it didn't cost you anything, why are you upset? And it helps other districts out, but the mentality of that, and it's the largest school district we've got, so they always carry a lot of weight, but that's their mentality.
Okay.
And when, my personal thought, and since we're here talking about it, I might as well share, I see where comparable wage factor does have some balancing when it comes to wages through our employees, which is 80% of our general fund. But when I pick up the phone and call, I don't call them, but when somebody calls from the district, calls for instructional materials at the depot that everybody has to buy from, they don't say, oh, we're going to adjust your account down 2% because you're DCD below 100. They've never done that. When we pick up the phone and we call Dell and order a computer, whoever computer company, they don't ask us what our DCD is. So we're paying as much for everything else as anybody is. So other than wages, it really isn't a factor. And one of the things that bothered me the most, which is reconciled now, it doesn't bother me as bad anymore, is when you're trying to help, when you look at the intent of TSIA, when they started that. They said, these districts are below 47.5, and we want everybody to get 47.5. They didn't say, well, if your DCD is 97%, you get to go to 97% of 47.5. They said 47.5. They gave a hard number. And then On top of that, the slap in the face was, they did the they did the DCD on the TSIA. So the school districts that were struggling to get to the 47.5 correlated with the ones that had a low DCD. And then they used the DCD factor on the TSIA funding, which had the intent of getting everybody to 47.5. It was the most ridiculous thing in my mind to reconcile.
But also affects your local effort, by the way, if you have lower wages. So we get double whammied on the DCD.
Yep.
But the other thing that just seems odd to me, because originally, if their citizens voted for an additional millage, that district should get that cash.
This isn't the voted approved, this is the discretionary, this is the .748.
Oh, the .748.
The .748, so they get to keep the above average on their .748. And so here they are, they're at a 102, so they're getting 2% more, and they're getting a higher than average, so they're getting kind of a double increase, or double over everybody else.
You may be a star witness.
I'll be quiet now.
Do you think, though, Mr. Ward, where is that extra, where are they getting the extra 2% to continue paying them above the 100? Is it from putting the compression into the,
Well, obviously, if they moved everybody down to 100%, they'd have more funding to bring everybody up. So it's coming from us. But when you talk to them, they'll say, we're a donor district. We earn all this money, and then we're punished and penalized because, we have to give it to you guys. And I will tell you, I've heard some of the comments, and we've heard some of the comments in the last training with board members, and, we kept hearing, we're a donor district, we're a donor district, and it's like, you're not sending, I think they actually thought they were sending money to the state, and the state was sending us the money, and that's not the case. It was just.
The truth is, we're sending money, and then they're shaving off a piece to give to them.
And give to.
It's the opposite. Ridiculous. So where is the other, so if everybody's at 100, where's the money coming from
right,
for the
that's what I'm asking.
Right.
two?
yes.
Right.
Oh, no, where is,
Do you know?
Well, it's in one pot, so everybody's at 100, and some are at 102, so the ones that are 102 are getting more than everybody else. So
They
if you moved
adjusted what
everybody to
100
100,
is?
everybody can
adjusted
move
above
up.
100?
They adjusted to
Yeah.
100, right. That's what I was trying to figure out. Where's the extra money coming from? So they've adjusted what 100 is.
For them, for the ones that are over 100. So if their DCD is 102, then their BSA is calculated with 102%.
Got it.
but where's the two if everybody's at 100? Because I've never heard of, if you got 100% of your money, where's the other 2% coming from? I don't understand.
Well, the state don't kick in as much, or
The state's kicking in to make up the
yeah,
difference.
right.
But do you think that's why I was asking, do you think that them putting the district, the compression fund into that BSA and then distributing that equally, that would take away some of our compression funds and give it to other districts?
Sure.
It's all in the same pot, so it might be able,
So bringing everybody up to 100 was probably part of that compression.
right.
They took some of the money from the compression and moved it over?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because where else?
Okay,
the
this is all
additional-
convoluted.
But honestly, in my personal opinion, what they were doing was they were trying to get everything in the BSA as they could, because now that is the number that they hand to the scholarships.
Yes,
And that's where it's going.
I don't disagree with you at all.
So Scott, to that point right there, to kind of wrap it up and just kind of swag it a little bit. So if 262 is the BSA increase, including all of the restricted funds being moved into the BSA, after you take all that out, after you take out the scholarships and the charter schools and everything else, what do you think we're getting as a district in a BSA increase? $30, $50?
That would be, no, it would be close to that 262.
Okay, so that's after the
That's after all the
1/6,
adjustments,
after
yeah.
everything, okay. But the number they're saying is 12 or 13%.
Yeah, the
increase.
12% number's not right.
Right, and it's really 4.7 or whatever, okay.
And the 262 is where we're going to maintain this current teacher and instructional and non-instructional salaries and also make any increases.
That's correct.
Health insurance, everything else.
That is correct.
Why do you think they never talk about non-instructional? Why do you think that is? Because that's the engine.
I'm not sure. Honestly, I think it's easy to wrap your hands around teachers because they're one group and they're very consistent in what they are. But I think as soon as you step outside of that arena, it gets all over the place. So it's just,
Right.
yeah.
Huh.
Okay.
Good, this is a great meeting.
We all feel better.
Always
Give
bring
Mr.
good
Myers
news,
some work.
Scott. Thank you.
All right.
Right.
That concludes
Chairman,
mine.
I'd like for this, as soon as Mr. Myers can give us some opinion, I'd like for us to workshop this, because I think sooner rather than later, because this is baloney.
I want to schedule a meeting with Scott. I'll meet with you separately, Bill. get my arms around it, and then we'll see what we can come up with.
Okay, very kind, thanks.
Yep.
Yep, that sounds great. All right. Anything else on the budget?
No.
All right, board member comments, anything? Superintendent?
I'm good.
Attorney? Nope. All right, and I think we are adjourned.